Well, hey there, Facebook Live. I'm Shay McAllister here with the CEO and President of the Center for Women and Families, Elizabeth Martin. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for taking the time to come and have this important conversation with us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We really appreciate it. We know it's going to take a second for everyone to join us, so we definitely are going to give you that time to get started. But I want to make sure everyone knows exactly what we're here to talk about. Right now on WHAS 11 News at 6, we are airing a very emotional story, a mother's heartbreaking plea. Her daughter is dead, and there are no charges yet in this case. But she told us about a history of a domestic violence and abusive relationship, something that has really been difficult for her to deal with. And she felt like she didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to talk to. She didn't know who could help. And that's what we want to help do right now, is start that conversation, provide you at home with important resources that are available in our community and options. If you feel like you're trapped, if you feel like you need someone to call. So first, let's just start with the center. President and CEO of the Center for Women and Families, for those of you who are just now joining us, we're talking about domestic violence resources specifically for people whose family members are trapped in an unsafe situation. So Elizabeth, what can you offer from the center? And we'll start there.
So the first thing that we can offer is a phone call, a conversation with our trained advocates 24/7, 365 days a year, to not only have conversation with victims and survivors, but family and friends. How do I have the conversation? What are some of the words that I need to use? How can I help them to see that they are in a domestic violence situation? Because from my limited understanding of the situation, Mom had tried on a number of occasions to get Brittany to see what was happening, what they were seeing that maybe Brittany wasn't seeing. Because one of the things that we know is oftentimes victims have been in these relationships for so long that the emotional and psychological abuse has gone on for years before the physical abuse ever begins. So it's about how to have that conversation, how to help them see what other people are seeing and how dangerous it is. So making that phone call.
And which is such a difficult one, and we know it is. If you're just now joining us, we want to make sure that you know exactly what we're talking about. We have an expert here in WHAS 11 Studios to talk about getting help. If someone you know or love is in a dangerous relationship, it can be so difficult to know where you even start. Elizabeth here is an expert. She has all of the information you need, and we want to make sure that we're giving it to you. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to share your questions with us. We're going to be checking Facebook Live. We are going to be answering your questions just to get this conversation going, though.
Right.
What are some of the signs? In this case, the case that we're talking about here, Mom says she was aware that this was not a good situation. She was aware that there was a problem. What if someone's wondering?
Well, some of the signs that you're going to look for, it's one of the first things that we see is that isolation. So one of the things that perpetrators, as we refer to them, abusers, want to do is they wanted to begin to isolate the victim for any type of support outside of themselves. Because this is about the perpetrator. This is about power and control. So if you've got friends or family that all of a sudden you're not seeing them as much, or you are out with them, or you're with your daughter, and perpetrators continuing to text. Where are you? What are you doing? You know, oh, I've got to respond to that text. Oh, this is the 10th time he's texted me. Those are signs. Those are not healthy relationship behaviors when we're tracking somebody, when we're always trying to monitor their whereabouts. So that's one of the conversations to have is, wow, this person really seems to want to have a lot of power and control. Because oftentimes it's misrepresented as love and affection. Oh, I love you so much, I need to know where you are. No, if you love somebody that much, you're going to trust them, that they're going to come home, and this is a healthy adult relationship.
And what's the right way to breach that so that you don't overstep or you make this person feel defensive? You know, how do you bring that up?
You just want to gently say, you know, I noticed that you're texting this person a lot, and you know, really want to spend time with you, but they're obviously needing a lot of control. And if they say, oh no, they don't, they're just really concerned about me. Okay, well, just, you know, keep that in mind, that it seems that they have a real need to know your every whereabouts. You're an adult. That's really odd. So just kind of gently mentioning it. Try not to place judgment, because judgment oftentimes shuts people down.
Okay.
But keeping that conversation going and pointing out some of those little cues, because planting that seed is going to help them to think about that.
And if you're just now joining us, we are with the President and CEO of the Center for Women and Families. Elizabeth Martin's an expert in domestic violence, in helping families, not just you. And if you're worried about your loved one, you can find some advice here on exactly what to do to keep them safe, to get them out of a dangerous situation. We would love to see your questions, your comments. Our team here is helping us monitor any of those questions and comments, so they're going to be sharing them with us. I'm going to take a look here so we can see them too. But as we continue this conversation, Elizabeth, let's talk a little bit about getting help, reaching out. Do you need to ask your family member, is it okay if I reach out? I'm concerned for you. I'd like to go to the center. Or is it appropriate just to call the center, feel out the situation?
It's appropriate just to call the center. Because you're not only reaching out for the survivor, the victim, but you're reaching out for yourself. How is this affecting you? Because this isn't just an individual problem. This is a whole family, a whole community problem. And so no, you do not need the permission of your loved one, of your friend, of your coworker. You can call anytime, again, 24/7.
I know you've dealt with so many families, mothers even, who probably feel a little bit hopeless. What would you say to them right now to encourage them, to stay engaged in that relationship, to call the center, especially if it feels like their daughter, their friend, whoever isn't listening?
What you said, stay engaged. Don't give up. Don't ask, why don't you leave? Again, try to keep the judgment out of it, but continue to say, I care about you, I love you, I'm concerned. The person that you're with, some of the behaviors are concerning to me. It might even scare me. Is this really the type of person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, who needs to have that type of power and control over you? But again, keep that engagement going, keep that conversation going, because what you don't want to do is to sever that tie by getting upset or by getting angry, exasperated, because you've lost that person and you're pushing them farther into the relationship.
Right, okay. So we mentioned one of the warning signs here, something to look for, is if you're constantly getting checked up on, if they're constantly asking, where are you, what are you doing? Are there any other warning signs that someone, maybe you would think it was caring, but hearing it here, you might think of it differently?
So one of the things that we often see is the perpetrator, the abuser, trying to control what the other person wears. So if it's, I was going to wear that outfit tonight, but he didn't want me to. Again, you need somebody to make decisions for you. So let's talk about that. Wow, that's a beautiful outfit on you. I think I hope you'll think about wearing it again. Being with somebody in a relationship who controls what we wear, how we wear our hair, whether we paint our fingernails, whether we don't, what color, those are all signs of abuse. Those are signs of, I need to have power and control over you so that when you step out this door, I know who is and isn't looking at you. And so having those conversations. Maybe it's a mother who's bought a really pretty dress for their daughter, and she said she was going to wear it out to dinner, and they come, what happened to that dress? I thought you were going to wear that. Well, he didn't want me to. That's concerning.
And I definitely want to talk here a little bit. And just a reminder, if you're watching at home, you can definitely submit any questions, any comments. We have an expert here who is more than willing to give you some, even your situation, you can ask for a friend. It's for judgment-free zone here. We just want to help. Let's talk about EPOs, emergency protective orders, something you file for the court, that a judge has to approve it. Do they work? Are they real protection? Is it something you suggest women do if they're afraid?
I absolutely suggest they do, because first of all, it starts the paper trail. There is a misnomer that if I get a protection order, that somehow it's a shield around me now, that I'm protected and I can go about my business as if nothing happened. That is not true. What the protective order does legally is if it's granted by the judge, if that perpetrator violates that order, it gives the police the right to immediately arrest them. And it does start that paper trail. Our piece in that is, if someone is getting a protective order, we please ask that they reach out to the center, let us know when their court date is, what docket they're in, because they're going to get a piece of paper that's going to say that. We're going to meet you there. And one of the most important conversations we're going to have with you is safety planning. There's a lot around safety planning that victims often don't think of. We're going to talk to you about which direction do you go to the grocery store? Where do you get your nails done? How often do you go to the gym? What time do you go to the gym? How do you drive to work? Where do you park? There's all these little small things that we do in our everyday life that we don't think about. And the thing to remember about abusers is having power and control over that victim and knowing where they are becomes a full-time job. I actually know of a situation where a perpetrator quit his job and spent every minute tracking his victim. And it really becomes an obsession. And so perpetrators know, I know how she drives. I know where she goes to, where she parks, what time she goes to lunch, what time she leaves, what time she picks the kids up. So all of those things we're going to talk to you about and how to begin to change that.
And excuse me, when we talk about these emergency plans, these safety plans, how do you begin that? Is that something we mentioned a family member can call the center and work with? Do you need to be doing that hand in hand with the victim? What do you suggest?
If the family or friend wants to call us, we can have that conversation as well. We're also going to encourage the family or friend to talk to the victim about, okay, I understand where you are. I'm here, I'm going to support you, but can we have a code word? Is there some type of a code word that maybe you and I can develop between us that if something does start to go really bad, you can text me that code word, and that tells me to call 911 or to come over. You know, we really encourage that police get involved in those lethal situations because, you know, it can be dangerous for other family members. But we strongly recommend code words for victims in situations where they may not be able to get out, but maybe they could send a quick text.
There's something I've heard from the center over the last several years is you cannot rescue them.
That's right.
Why do you guys say that, and what do you mean by that?
Well, there's a couple of things about that. One is the victim knows better than anybody when is the safest time to leave. Because what victims often done is if they know every step that their abuser makes, they've worked really hard to survive in that relationship. So they can tell you what it sounds like when the door shuts. What do those footsteps sound like? Is it an angry footstep? Is it a calm footstep? How's that door? What's that behavior as I'm hearing the person coming into the house? And so they know when the safest time to leave is. They also know how to leave, what's the safest way to leave in that situation. And so when we get into rescuing others, we not only put our lives at risk, we could put the victim in if there's children, pets, we put other people's lives at risk. We also know that the first 24 to 48 hours after a victim leaves is the most lethal. And so they're going to tell you, okay, this is not a safe time. I need to wait till this, and this happens, and then it's a safe time. I'll call you when I'm there, but give me the space to do this. The thing to remember is that leaving is a process. It's not an event. It's not just something somebody just does. It's a process that has to take time.
If there's a mother out there, an aunt, or dad who's interested in calling the center today, what will they be met with? What are the expectations if they make that first phone call? What kind of information is the center going to ask from them? Just to give people a little bit of an idea.
Sure. The center, the advocate is going to ask, can you tell me about your situation? If you don't want to give your name, if you don't want to give your address or anything personal about yourself, you don't have to. We're just here to answer your questions and to walk you through the process. So if mom or dad is calling and saying, my daughter, I know she's in an abusive relationship, what do I do? They may say, well, tell us a little bit about that. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And then they're going to give you some suggestions for that.
Okay.
And then again, you can call as many times as you want. It's not a one-time phone call. It's a multiple time. Because people's situations change on a regular basis.
Right. And we have some questions? Okay, great.
This first one, I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer or not, but wanting to know if protective orders tally up. So if a perp gets multiple protective orders against him or her, is there a record of how many there are against that person?
There can be. Usually what happens is protective orders get extended. So it's not like one ends, unless there's a long period of time. Now, what we have seen is that one perpetrator may have multiple protective orders that have come from multiple victims. There's a couple of perpetrators who unfortunately murdered their victims in 2022. That as we've gone into those cases and we've looked at them, they have had multiple protective orders from multiple victims. But typically if it's one victim and something has happened, then that protective order is going to get extended.
Interesting. If you're just joining us, a reminder, send us your questions, your comments, your concerns. We do have an expert here. Elizabeth Martin can answer anything. We're talking domestic violence, how to get someone you love out of an unsafe situation.
One other question that we have, can the team accompany defendant to help advocate for the victim, underage victim as well, underage one as well? I don't know if that means a team from the center or maybe a group of.
We talked about how the center will come to court dates and kind of help you set up.
So
So
maybe
maybe
that's-
Maybe that's
more
what it
on
is.
that help, yeah, and how
Yeah.
far does it go?
Yeah, absolutely. So we provide what we call legal advocacy, which again, we don't provide legal advice because our staff are not attorneys, but they are trained on how to advocate,
Okay.
how to advocate for that victim, how to make sure that victim's voice is heard, how to make sure they have the resources that they need. To talk about, again, safety planning. You know, one of the things that I heard when I was in court one day working with a victim was perpetrator had guns. And, you know, the judge said, "Where are your guns?" And he said, "I'm going to give them to my dad. My dad's going to lock them up." And so as we were talking to the victim, we brought that up and she said, "Well, he's going to hand them over to his dad." Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how safe that really is. Because her plan was to go back home and she thought everything was fine. We talked a long safety plan with her and strongly encouraged her to find another place to stay at least for a while. That just because dad's going to lock them up doesn't necessarily mean they're safe. Unless they're confiscated by the sheriff, I wouldn't say they're safe because that means they can still have access.
That's something you guys who have experience with this were able to identify.
Yes.
And maybe if you were just sitting in the courtroom, you wouldn't know.
No, you absolutely would not. You absolutely would not. And one of the other things that we're going to help victims to see, victims who've called us multiple times, we're able to go into our confidential database and pull up information on that victim and be able to share with them, you know, you called here so many other times back in, you know, I don't know, September, October, and November. Let's talk about where this is progressing. Because again, one of the things that victims lose perspective. You know, I often have heard victims say, yeah, he threatens to kill me, but he won't really do that. Let's talk about how this is progressing, where we are now compared to when you first called. First he was yelling, he was screaming. Now he's hitting me, he's threatening me with a gun. We see this as a progression. We consider this to be a very lethal case.
I have another good question here. If a domestic crime has been committed, but the victim has a cultural barrier, language, religious beliefs, other cultural differences, what resources exist to get that person help?
Well, one of the things that we do is we provide a language line. So if we don't physically have an interpreter on site, we will make sure that there is an interpreter through our language line. And then we will also connect them with a number of different resources. We work very closely with Kentucky Refugee Ministries. We work very closely with Catholic Charities, La Casita Center. La Casita Center has been primarily Latinx individuals, but I know, talking with Karina, who is a very dear friend of mine, that they also serve anybody and everybody. And one of the things that we unfortunately see is we do have a lot of immigrants here who come from cultures where domestic violence was acceptable. And we are trying to do that education to say it is not acceptable to hit somebody. It's not acceptable to hit your partner. And so we're already having some of those conversations, but we will connect them with resources.
Really important there. Do we see anything else coming in over there, you guys?
Those are the questions that were in the comments.
Great
section.
questions. Well,
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
if anything else comes up, if you're watching at home, maybe you don't want to post your comment here, you can send me an email, smcallister@whas11.com. I'll send it right to Elizabeth, and we'll make sure we are getting answers to all of your questions. We want to make sure we're offering anyone who needs help, getting a loved one out of a situation, getting yourself out of a dangerous situation, that we're able to do that. And so thank you guys for watching us. Elizabeth, is there anything else that you'd like to say? Just some last minute advice, maybe something, you know, our mom tonight, the story we did tonight, she described just feeling so hopeless. She's like, I couldn't save my daughter, police couldn't save my daughter. What would you say to someone who might be feeling similar?
Reach out. I'd love to talk with her. I know that some of our other staff would love to talk with her. We've had conversations with other family members who lost loved ones during 2022. You know, Jefferson County had the highest rate of domestic violence homicides than we'd had in 2 years. We've had those conversations to also help them understand domestic violence victims, what goes on in their minds, what are some of the things that happen throughout that process in the relationship that leave them feeling like they need to stay in that, and help loved ones feel like, you did everything you could do. It's difficult because, again, this goes on for years before the first lethal situation ever occurs. I think the biggest thing that I always want to tell people is, please, if you have any question, if your relationship starts to feel, God, he seems really jealous and he seems like he's just wanting to control me, have a conversation. Check that out. Don't sit and just wonder until the next thing happens. The other thing is, we often hear victims talk about, well, he just did this once and now he's made up for it. If he's done it once, it's going to happen again. And we see that over and over again. So again, please reach out, have a conversation. Don't suffer in silence.
Excellent advice. Anything else before we sign off here, you guys?
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for spending this time with us. If you do come up with a question, post it in the comments later. We'll get back to it. If you want to email me, smcalister@whas11.com. I will make sure any of your questions get right on over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth Martin, Center for Women and Families, thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. Thank
we
you
really
for
appreciate
highlighting
it.
this important subject.